Reddit, what's your WTF was wrong with me as a kid? Story. When I was 3, my mother saw me huddled in the corner of my room. When she walked closer, she saw me plucking these massive black ants from the carpet and chopping them in half with those kid-safe scissors. When she asked me why I was doing that, I tilted my head and said simply, "They're only boys, mommy." When I was a kid I liked frosting. Who the hell doesn't? So one time, when I'm 3 or 4 just derping around in the kitchen, I find this tube of frosting and try to open it so I can get the sweet sugary contents. I can't get the cap off, so I just start chewing on the side of the tube till I get through it. When I finally punch through with my molars, it turns out not to be frosting but actually super glue. They had to take me to the dentist to chisel my teeth out so I could open my mouth again. TL. Doctor glued my mouth shut. 2nd grade maybe? The teacher took us out into the hall to use the restrooms and some kid I know took a massive dump. Everyone gathered around to marvel at it, and some other kid was like, "I dare any one of you to touch it." Let's just say I was the only brave kid in my class. That started a chain reaction of stupid shit that landed me in fuckloads of trouble throughout the next 2 years, as I became that kid who does anything on a dare. I threw food across the cafeteria, asked the math teacher are there rings around Uranus, pooped in a broom closet, and wandered aimlessly around the school trying to stay out of the sight of teachers who were looking for me. And that's just the shit I remember. Little kid me just wanted to be one of the cool kids. Vertical bar. When I was 3, I would apparently do headstands on the railing. My grandma freaked out the first time she saw me doing this and ran over to get me down. My mom stopped her and told her just leave him alone. He'll come down when he wants to. He does that all the time and only falls when you try to stop him. I have zero recollection of this. When I was like 7, I used to tie myself up, or attempt to, and tape my mouth shut, and sit in the closet pretending to be a kidnap victim. The first time I saw kissing on TV, like couples kissing passionately, I was fascinated and tried to do it with my dad. Seriously, WTF, self. Caught bees and spiders, put them in a cardboard box with cellophane over the top, so they couldn't escape. When I had caught about 20 of each, I would remove a wall I had put between the two and watch the battle. After about 20 minutes I got bored with this, and put a smoke bomb into the box, killing everything inside. I would walk around the neighborhood, in our gated community type thing, and rescue frogs and salamanders out of the window wells of every single house. Every morning. Eat breakfast, rescue, walk them down to the lake, then free them. The neighbors knew not to worry if the weird girl was crawling in their window wells. Once I took some girl who was visiting her grandma with me on my route. When I went to let them go, she took one frog and ripped its legs off and threw it in the water. She told me to watch the fish eat it. I flipped out, told her to get away from me, and never played with her again. Bitch. Ruining my hard work. I'm still mad at her. I'm gigantic Star Trek nerd. My first Star Trek con was at the tender age of 7 years old. It was 1991, a simpler time. Season 4 of The Next Generation was winding up, and I loved it all. I had all of the Star Trek action figures. I used to make Will Riker cheat on Dina with Beverly in the confines of my own holodeck. I would dethrone Captain Picard as captain and assign Ensign Crusher to the ranks, just so he could be told to shut up by alien races in negotiations. Times were wonderful. So innocent. But, throughout my collection of action figures, Star Trek trading cards, and transporter room playsets, there was one thing I didn't have, and it was heartbreaking for any kid not to have. I used to think that my mom and dad were divorced. Truth be told, I was the product of a late night bar hookup, and my dad, being the bastion of responsibility, took me out on the weekends to be a father. Usually this consisted of him showing up at my house, my mom and dad getting into it, and then him taking me to the mall to piss my mom off even more. Worked for me. Dad moonlighted as a card dealer as well, so if he really wanted to piss her off, he'd take me to the smoky poker rooms and hang out with a bunch of crabby old dudes playing L0W ball. Even though dad was playing the part of decent father, I still was firmly on my mom's side and believed everything she said about him. A Romulan warbird. It was supremely badass. It stared at me from the KB toy store like nothing else had before. I already had one of the transport shuttles from the Enterprise and the bridge crew of the Enterprise. I wasn't interested in the Enterprise toy, I wanted the enemy. The Romulan warbird was incredible. It could cloak at will, undermining the offensive capabilities of the Federation, leaving only a faint trail of magnetic resonance, like it had never been there. I personally wanted to command this ship and take it upon myself to cloak the bastard and go into warp. Problem was, I had been grounded the week before my mother, in a tragic incident involving a game in which we neighborhood kids were throwing rocks at each other. I accidentally pegged a kid with a sharp rock, sending a stream of blood flowing down his forehead. Don't feel bad for him, he had laser-like precision, and left me with countless bruises and cuts from these rounds. Mine was merely a lucky shot. My victory was short-lived, as my mom burst from the front door, angry that I had stripped her away from days of our lives. I was grounded, and to make it worse, my dad was prohibited from buying me anything on our weekly visitation. As I stared down at the Empire's pride of Romulus, I knew I had to be a Romulan myself, to secure the toy. Instead of begging and pleading with my dad, or even trying to walk out of the store with it, I calmly told my dad that I needed to use the restroom. As he walked me towards the Sears tire store, I sprinted out of his reach and began the waterworks as I ran into the store. The attendant, lazily doing whatever employees did back then without the internet, got big-eyed when I ran in. I shouted that there was a man after me, and I didn't know who he was. The hero, God bless his soul, locked the front door just as my father was coming in. "That's the guy," I screamed, crocodile tears flowing, no longer cloaked. Lucky for my dad, we looked nothing alike, and looked more like a weird old guy chasing after a kid. The employee rushed to call 911, and I had a slight smile on my face, somehow thinking that the warbird was going to be mine. Apparently it's not that easy. The cops came and put my father in cuffs. Realizing the gravity of the situation, I turned to my dad and said, "So, are you going to buy me the warbird now?" I can't imagine the cops looking too pleased after that. Somehow, I ended up restrained like my dad, both of us sitting in the cruiser, waiting for my mom to come clear both of our names. I wasn't allowed to watch Star Trek until the middle of season 5. It was brutal, not knowing whether or not Captain Picard was a Borg. And fuck the Romulans. PS. I used to see things, like once I was walking to school and saw a freshly dug hole in the grass by the road. It contained a dead black cat. One of its eyes was dangling out the socket but still attached. When I realized what I had just seen, I did a double take, and it was gone. No cat, no hole, nothing. When I was 9 years old, I used to collect the little pats of butter they gave us in the cafeteria at lunchtime. I kept them in my locker. They were sandwiched between two pieces of waxed paper, rather than actually sealed, so they weren't protected from spoilage. I collected a few dozen or so before my teacher noticed my locker smelled like rotten meat and investigated. I have no idea what I was thinking. Was really into wolf/sled dog stories as a youngster. Call of the Wild, Julie of the Wolves, even White Fang. I would crawl around everywhere. One day, I stole all the belts I could find in the house, strapped them around me like a harness, tied the other end to the laundry basket, filled a laundry basket with anything I could find, including my cats, and ran around the house until my mom caught me. Need I mention I had tied some belts around my neck, because obviously all dogs need collars? So basically had that basket gotten caught on anything, I could have asphyxiated to death. WTF would my parents have thought if they'd found my dead body attached to a laundry basket filled with Animorphs books, dirty clothes, Barbie dolls, and some stuffed animals? When I was 14 I was watching TV. I had just changed the light bulb in my lamp, and I had the old one in my hand. For some reason I decided to bite into it like an apple. Of course it shattered, and shards of glass got lodged into my gums and every other area of my mouth. I bled profusely and screamed like a little girl. I must have picked glass out of my mouth and teeth for about a week after that. When I was much younger, around 5 or so, I found a caterpillar nest in a tree. I wanted to keep the caterpillars as pets, so I shoved several of them into my underwear at school. Later I removed them and released them into my own backyard. I also used to take grasshoppers home from the soccer field in my backpack. What the fuck was wrong with me as a kid? climbed the fence in the backyard naked. I would run up to the altar in church and hide under it and stuff. When my mom came up to get me and carry me off, I once yelled, "No, mommy, don't beat me," even though she never did. I would walk into random people's houses if they were unlocked, all age 7 and down. I will never have children. According to my older brother, he came downstairs one night and saw young me, around 4 or 5, eating a stick of butter. I have no memory of this. And when my son grows up, I can tell him that when he was 2 years old, he would point to any person he saw in an army uniform. We live on an army base and shout "Horse, horse, who was?" at them in an attempt to say rah. My sister had a sleepover and they were playing tea. I really wanted to play with them, but they kept kicking me out of the room. The 5th time I try playing with them, they all smile and ask me to bring water on the tea holder thing. I was so excited to go to the kitchen and be their servant. I had to pee so bad on my way there, so I go pee before. I had to shit too. As I was pooping, I felt used, as they only wanted me to bring their water and not actually play with them. So I scooped the dirty water from the toilet and serve it as their tea. When they all tried their tea after their cheers, they went straight to the bathroom to puke. I have never felt so happy in my life before. Also, I was never allowed my sister friends ever again, not even now that I'm 20. On my first day of preschool, I decided to wear a pink bikini with a kitty cat on the chest. I'm a guy. When my mom asked my doctor if this was odd, he said kids my age don't have a fully developed concept of masculine and feminine, and that I just really liked the bikini. The next day, all the boys in my preschool were either wearing or wanted girls' one-piece bikinis. Guess I started a trend. I turned out straight, and so are my friends I still know from preschool as far as I know. I used to make my WWF action figures wrestle my pet birds. My birds were pissed, and my fingers always lost. One time, I stuck a long strand of toilet paper between my ass cheeks and pretended I had a tail. From the moment I could walk until I was a few years into elementary school, I was extremely hyperactive. I would bite people, slap my baby brother in the face with a curtain rod, break things compulsively, etc. Something about my disposition at that age just made me love creating chaos wherever I went. Doctors told my mom I would never be able to attend regular classes in public school because of my absolute refusal to do anything my mom said, often to the point of doing something only because I knew it was something I wasn't allowed to do. I was often kept on a leash, not around my neck, but one of those shoulder harnesses that were made for shitty little kids like myself. Once when I was about 3 years old, I was standing in a large line of people at the airport with my mom and dad. I was still attached to the leash, but I still had plenty of mischief to create in my immediate vicinity. I noticed a morbidly obese woman standing on the other side of the belt barrier. I waited for my parents to be distracted, then darted underneath the barrier and bit the random woman as hard as I could on her ass. She screamed, "Argh! Something bit me." My parents were very angry and embarrassed. I was a weird kid. Actually, I'm still really weird, but I've learned to hide it better. One thing I remember doing is spending recess alone sorting the pebbles in the playground according to their type: igneous, metamorphic, sedimentary, roughly age 7. I've also talked to myself my whole life and tended to do it publicly as a child, mostly because I just forgot I wasn't alone. No, I don't respond to myself unless I'm trying to freak someone out. Edit. I just asked my mom this question, and she informs me I used to sit with my back turned to the teacher in early elementary school. This is one of my most infamous childhood stories. When I was maybe around 4 or 5 years old, I used to go to a day nursery while my parents were at work. It was mostly staffed by ladies in their 20s, many of whom, even at my age, I thought were pretty hot. So one day, while the other little kids and I were sat down for lunch, I put down my little sandwich, hopped out of my chair, waltzed up to one of the ladies, reached up, and, with both hands, grabbed her tits. The memory is fairly distant, so I don't remember the immediate aftermath, but needless to say, I was told off. DM, GB, doesn't matter, got boobs. TL. Doctor grabbed her 2 handfuls of tits at nursery when I was 5 years old, was told off. Edit, I should say, looking back at it today, I can't help but admire my confidence and effortless class. A couple of other stories had me pegged as weird, though I wouldn't see why. Haha. When I was really little, fuck if I know how old, I would cut off the sleeves of my long sleeved shirts and stick them in the back of my pants, making a sort of tail. Then I'd proceed to follow my cat around the house, meowing, trying to convince him I was also a cat. I used to hide under tables in kindergarten, hissing at people who tried to get me out from under the table, or to anyone who got close, I'd claw their ankles. This will probably get buried, but I was a strange kid. Warning, NSFL. When I was a kid, my sisters and I used to always fight over the pretty fork at dinner time. One day, I took a shit and really wanted to know if the yellow chunks in my poop were peanuts or corn kernels. I took the pretty fork, dissected my poop log, and discovered they were corn kernels. I washed the fork really well, and put it back in the drawer. I never told my sisters what I did with it until years later, and I never fought over the pretty fork again. Like most kids, I loved dinosaurs. As a 4-year-old, I knew the difference between plant and meat-eating dinosaurs, and had some basic concept on what a food chain was. I was playing outside one morning, and found a bunch of birds were foraging on a dogwood tree in my yard. I wanted to get closer, but every time I got within 15 feet they would all scatter and fly up into some pine trees. Naturally, I suppose they thought I was going to eat them. So I went to a nearby tree and grabbed a fistful of leaves to show them I was a plant eater and didn't want to eat them. I was bitterly disappointed when that didn't work. But hey, science is all about trial and error. I had a recurring dream/fantasy that one day a masked gunman would come into my school and force me to have sex with all the hot girls. For an entire year of my life I believed/acted like a dog. I do not remember at all. Apparently, I would only eat my dinner off the ground and would regularly bite my parents' ankles.